Hey y'all, and welcome back to the big mess that is my universe. Just a reminder that everything in Earth OCU is in the same universe, so yes, this is happening in the same world where the Dragon Ball plotline exists, just a lot later in the timeline. This is Chaos, welcome to the show. Before we get into this one, we're gonna have to go over a couple of things, so stay tuned. I'm gonna be making a couple of changes to the established canon. So, the first thing we need to talk about is Ben and Gwen Tennyson. Their families are, let's be honest, outside of Max, nobody cares. I mean, Ben's mom and dad only appear in a few episodes outside of Alien Force, and he cares about his grandpa so much more to the point that he'll literally just abandon his parents on a whim if he thinks his grandpa is in trouble, which nobody even questions. Like, seriously, where were Ben's family the entirety of Alien Force? Their son just disappeared for months on end without questioning anything. And when it comes to Gwen's family, they are really nowhere to be found. I think Ken Tennyson, her brother, appears in like one episode in all of the shows combined. So, because of that, and because a lot of Gravity Falls really has to do with the bond between twins, I thought it might be fun to just cut out the middleman. So, not only are Ben and Gwen in this reality siblings, but they are fraternal twins, so that they could have some commonality with Dipper and Mabel. Number 2, I'm aging Ben and Gwen up to 12 to meet with Dipper and Mabel's age. This really doesn't change much except for one of the many coincidences that give Ben his hero name. But considering that he still only has 10 aliens and that his last name is Tennyson, I think it'll be fine. Number 3, for a couple of reasons, I'm actually aging Wendy down. She is now the same age as Dipper, Mabel, Ben, and Gwen. I honestly thought it would be pretty fun to do a version of that crush where there's actually a chance of them getting together, so I figured why not. Next, I need a reason for these fools to actually hang out in the same place together, especially since Ben travels around the country incredibly frequently. There's no way he'd just bum around Gravity Falls to hang out with some people that he barely knows. So, in this story, Ben and Gwen are Dipper and Mabel's cousins, which of course means that Max Tennyson is related to Stanford Pines. There is some really fun storytelling I can do with that, so fingers crossed people will like it. If they don't, I'm still gonna do it, but you know, fingers crossed. There will be some other changes to their family canon too, but you guys aren't here to see the same shows you've already seen parroted back to you. Also, one last note, the beginnings of these characters are definitely not as happy as their respective shows are. This is due to Earth OCU being capable of some pretty rough things and capable of being a pretty rough universe. You gotta remember, this is technically the same universe as Dragon Ball, where people get blown apart and cut in half and all kinds of stuff like that. So things can get pretty serious. Think of it like the same stories that the show started off at, but having the same kind of vibe as something like Lock and Key, which if you haven't read, captures the kids investigating mysterious things vibes, but amps up the fucked up nature to about 11. It's a frickin' awesome read, but definitely not kid friendly if you catch my drift. Which works out because neither am I. With all that long mess said, sit back, grab a snack, and let's jump into another story in the strongest Earth of the multiverse. A triangular silhouette floated in the depths of space, not any space that people would comprehend, of course. Fuming. Between all the dopes bumbling in and out of the negative zone these days, he was sure that sooner or later he'd be able to stumble out, but every time, nothing. Because the portals weren't open in the right place. Metropolis, Coast City, New York. He thought with all these super morons bumbling around that the world would be weird enough to handle him. But that stupid little Oregon town still drew him in. The only place he could emerge. But it didn't mean that he couldn't do anything. A long time ago, before the modern age of heroes, there was a group that knew of a great evil. It was him, of course. Those who knew about him prophesied a way to bring about his downfall, and they were nice enough to put the thing on an easy-to-read wheel. 10 idiots, who he happened to know through what little glimpses of the multiverse he got, had finally been born. All of them. He just didn't know who most of them were. But he could let loose his followers on the ones that he did know. After all, he was a god. There were thousands who would kneel before him. Hey Mabel, you ready? Dipper Pines walked into his twin sister's room. She actually gave him a smile. That was new. Ever since their parents had died a few months ago in that car accident, her usual spark had dimmed out. She was finally getting it back. He couldn't be more relieved. And to make matters the slightest bit better, they were finally going somewhere close to a permanent home again. Semi-permanent. They were going to see family for the summer. Their dad's father's brother, apparently. Apparently his name was Stan. You betcha, Dippin' Sauce. She would grab her bag, making a purposeful effort not to look around her room more. She'd be leaving her home for the last time, to go somewhere only for a summer before their lives would get thrown up into the unknown again. Dipper could only hope that summer might be fun enough to smack her back to normal as they rode to the airport. At least they had something to look forward to. Apparently there would be other people they knew there, even if they hadn't seen their cousin since they were little. Oregon? Oh, come on! Ben Tennyson grumbled in the backseat of his Grandpa Max's van, affectionately nicknamed the Rust Bucket. He had already been hesitant to take this trip. After all, his dad basically let him do anything we wanted. He barely wanted to give that up for a trip around the country, let alone one where he had to set up shop in the middle of nowhere for a month and a half to hang out with a couple of dorks he hadn't seen since they were 6. Calm down, doofus, it will do you some good. Last thing we need is you getting lost again. His sister rolled her eyes. Gwen had been particularly looking forward to this trip. While her brother had been thriving under their lack of supervision, she had been the one looking out for him. Ben had just about the worst knack for being a moron that she'd ever seen. Between getting into fights at school with kids who admittedly deserved it, and bumbling around town without anyone there to watch his back, she basically had to be the second parent to the little degenerate. Their grandfather, Max, just listens to them. He knows that as the adult he should probably cut in, make sure everything stayed civil, but he can't bring himself to do it. Their mother passing years ago had never sat right with him, and their son's behavior since then definitely hadn't. He was glad to get them away from the place for a bit, to give their lives a sense of normalcy for a change. At least he hoped it would be normal. He was getting called over by his brother of all people, a man operating under their missing brother's name, who was still a perpetual scam artist. Maybe this wasn't the best idea, but a lot of this wasn't Stan's fault. Max's parents never treated Stan the best. They only really spent time with Stanford because they thought he'd be successful. A big part of why Max changed his last name when he grew up was to get away from that whole mess. The Pines family was a disaster and a half. So, yeah, this might have not been the best idea, but Stan was family, and Max wasn't going to cut out family again. They had lost enough of them as it was. It had only been a week in Gravity Falls, but what Dipper hoped was coming to fruition was. Mabel, for the first time in a long time, was back to getting on his nerves, proudly proclaiming that she was going to have a summer of romance and chasing just about any male customer under 18 out the door. And it was everything he hoped for. Every now and then you could still see the hurt in her eyes, but it was drowned out by the excitement she got from every new trinket she found at the shack. Heck, she was so caught up that she didn't even notice when a vehicle made a big screeching sound right outside their doors. Oh, damn, already? Kids, I know you're incapable, but at least try to look decent. Their grunkle said, lining up at the door like he was in the military or something. Hey, what are we doing? Wendy, a girl Dipper had met earlier in the week, about his age and a little taller, lined up to Dipper, waiting for an explanation on whatever was going on. Family, Dipper explained as the doorbell rang. Everyone got a good look at the people at the front. Ben and Gwen had grown since the last time the Pines duo had saw them, but the same was true from the other perspective. The quad of preteens were about the same height, heck, even the same build, with Ben being only the slightest bit more athletic than everybody else, a fact that Dipper almost immediately felt jealous of. What followed was a pretty awkward greeting, even by Pine standards, as Gwen did her best to give an upbeat hello to their family, and Mabel tried to reciprocate with her own joy multiplying at having new family members enter her life. Dipper's awkward hello was met by Ben seeking to do almost anything else as quickly as possible. He was already glancing out the window looking for the quickest possible escape route. What was the most uncomfortable, though, was Max and Stan. The two of them locked eyes for a solid minute before Stan finally ushered the kids out. I gotta have a word with my brother. You two understand. Probably. I don't know. Go do what kids do. He shooed them into the attic without a second thought, before turning to the man now known as Max Tennyson. Alright, plumber boy. Let's chat. Upstairs, Mabel was excitedly showing the Tennyson twins everything their new home had to offer, which wasn't much yet since the pair hadn't had time to settle in, but at least some of them were enjoying the show. Gwen appreciated the massive glitter collection that Mabel had managed to amass in the short time she was here, especially with her somehow not being covered head to toe in the stuff. But it was Dipper that really interested her, with all the maps he collected of the area. The studious girl almost immediately became intrigued by the sleepy town's weird topography, especially the rock formation with an impossible hole in its side. She and Dipper were practically making plans to see them before someone finally noticed that Ben was nowhere to be found, and the window was open. Oh, that dweeb, I'm not getting in trouble for this. Relax, we'll help you find him. He couldn't have gotten in that much trouble in a place like this, right, Mabel? Yeah, we got this, Gwen 10. Mabel smiled as Gwen narrowed her eyes. Please never call me that, Gwen muttered, as they all left. They ended up splitting up after the first few minutes to cover more ground, agreeing to meet behind the shack in half an hour. One of them was bound to run into Ben before then, and once they did, his sister was going to give him the biggest punch of his life for this. Dipper stared at the girl's face as she said that, never more thankful to have Mabel as his sister than in that moment. 15 minutes. Ben had been walking around this dumpster of a town for 15 minutes, and all he managed to bump into was more woods. It was like the forest was half of the town or something. The sound of panting made Ben turn back towards where he came from, and there he saw, double over, merely a few feet away from him, his cousin. Great. Apparently he hadn't gotten as far as he hoped. There you are. We've been looking for you. Looks like it, Ben said, a flare of compassion hitting him as he helped the boy to his feet so he could catch his breath. Dude, your sister is freaked, Dipper groaned, Gwen's death stare replaying in his head. That's no surprise, Ben responded, shrugging off Dipper's attempts to lead him back. The two entered a kind of standoff, it only ending when Dipper threatened to have Gwen show up here to talk to him herself. Come on, man, I just want to be alone. Gwen's always attaching herself to me like I can't live for 5 minutes without her help. You know how annoying that is? Ben asked. Dipper honestly can't say yes. He does sometimes have to treat Mabel like a little sister, sure, but he knows she can take care of herself if she needs to. Look, man. Dipper narrows his eyes, staring at Ben's face, looking up into the sky. A shooting star that had just changed directions, and was now barreling right toward them. Talk later? Ben asked. Yep, Dipper answers, as the two boys run as fast as their legs can carry them, Dipper lagging behind, as the light from the meteor got brighter. Dipper knew he wasn't going to make it. That was, until Ben grabbed him, chucking the boy ahead right when the blast hit, the wave picking Dipper up, carrying him through the air until he collided with a tree. It took a moment for the boy to wake up. At least, he thought it was a moment. His head was so fogged up that when his vision cleared, he could barely understand anything 2 feet in front of him. All he noticed was that he was laying on something hard, red leather-bound journal with a golden hand plastered on top of it, and a number 3? Ah! Get it off of me! Get it off of me! Ben screamed. From the pit, Dipper remembered what happened. Tucking the book in his jacket for a reason he couldn't quite understand, he rushed to the boy's side. He wasn't going to forgive himself if something happened to Ben because he was too busy watching his back. He breathed the biggest sigh of relief when he saw what was actually there. The crashed satellite next to Ben apparently hadn't hurt him. He was screaming because something had attached itself to his wrist. Something that apparently wouldn't come off, judging from the sticks snapping off when he tried to pry the thing off. That was fine. As long as Ben wasn't injured, they could probably handle this. Dipper slid down the crater, landing next to Ben, just as Ben placed a hand on top of the watch's button next to its face, the face popping open. Just as Dipper was about to say that maybe messing with it wasn't the best idea, Ben pressed the face down, and was engulfed in an aura of green light. What? Holy crap! Dude, you're on fire! In the depths of space, Vilgax, conqueror of worlds, greatest warrior in the universe under Darkseid, sits, clutching his fist as a warrior kneels before him, one he had taken from the mad titan Thanos shortly before he died in a battle with Earth's greatest warriors, the Justice League, kneels before him. My lord, we have located the Omnitrix. It is on a planet in the Sol system. Earth, Vilgax growls. The best defended planet in the universe, a world so brimming with heroes that conquerors near and far knew that it was off-limits. Vilgax himself had considered it off-limits for years, but nothing was going to keep him from his prize. A full assault is nothing short of asinine and suicidal. Send our best hunters there to analyze the situation. Make sure they don't get on the League's radar. Yes, Lord Vilgax. Well guys, that's the end of this part. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I hope you have a great day.